As I've been working on this project, I've noticed that there is a whole lot more in computer vision that I don't know yet. At this stage, I am sort of throwing things at the wall to see if they'll stick. Next up, I have this whole list of models that I'm going to attempt to use. These algorithms fall into a few broad categories of items that may be useful. The first three algorithms here involve texture classification, which may be useful since we're looking at images that are primarily texture-based. When we look at tile 16, we can see that there's not necessarily a strong foreground background. It's more of a pockmarked surface. That's why texture seems like it could be a worthwhile endeavor. The three texture classification methods that I see in Scikit Image are multi-block local binary pattern, Gabor filter banks, and local binary pattern. Multi-block is looking at multiple blocks, so that seems somewhat useful. Gabor filter bank is based off of frequency and orientation. Frequency seems useful. Orientation may not be as useful. Looking again here at tile 16, we can see that most of these craters are somewhat circular. As a result, there is not a huge amount of identification information here. Orientation could be more useful for some of the ridge lines. Local binary pattern may be somewhat useful, but there may be some limit to this considering that it's looking at only single points to see if a value is darker or lighter than that specific point. This is an example output and shows that again it may be somewhat useful but potentially not completely useful. The second broad category is other items that I saw from the examples that looked somewhat promising. No specific category for those. Extrema may be a potential option. I don't recall if I already did that. Could be somewhat useful, still uncertain. Morphological filtering seems somewhat useful considering that again we're looking at morphology. Exactly how this will be used is still an open question, but it looks like it's worthwhile examining. Colocalization could be interesting because there are some things that are co-located with each other. As an example, you can see these two craters are super close together, and so close in fact that it forms more of a bent spheroid than a circle next to a circle. Registration using optical flow seems potentially useful because perhaps there's something to be found for flow. Looking at this image, some of the ridge lines look like there could be some level of movement pattern associated with them. Removing small objects as a possible path. Looking here, we have some large craters, some very obvious ones, and a bunch of tiny little craters that aren't as obvious, so potentially removing the smaller ones could be worthwhile. Window functions, I just saw fast Fourier transforms and thought, hey, maybe a transform of the terrain could be somewhat interesting. As you can see from the list, I have not fully exhausted the pre-built example algorithms to work with in Scikit Image. However, at this point, I still have low confidence that any of these pre-built algorithms will be exactly what I am looking for. OpenCV is more likely to have information that will be worthwhile. However, I plan to exhaust what I can from Scikit Image before I move back to OpenCV. If you have any additional ideas on how I can improve my search for a valid algorithm, please leave those in the comment section below. Until next time, to the stars!